냥지 전부 쏟던 힘이 정도는 몸 전부 그냥 다그 다른 산도 실물도 돈바 티지잖아 기시험 살 근데 전부는 이런 선정을 티지션로 일라 지금 분조장랑 소란도 공제 또반포를 신기로 우상선선 위며发表强艰难遭我今天问读书车愿解如来真实也为度化一切众生请大家发布上的菩提心下面我们讲
Let us now begin our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury. We have already covered on the animated and inanimated world. Currently, we are going to talk about the phenomena of the suffering and happiness within this animated and inanimated world. The wish-fulfilling treasury by Longchenpa may seem simple. However, there are lots of new knowledge and profound teachings that we didn't know before. These kinds of different teachings are stated rather very clearly over here. Let us begin on the 7th chapter, which is the happiness and suffering of the animated and inanimated world. There are three aspects: the connection, and then the brief explanation as well as extensive explanation. Let's look at the brief explanation. It has only one verse. It says that to talk about the nature of the animated and inanimate world, which has the alternation of the suffering and happiness, these kinds of manifestations are the ones based on the karma of the six realm beings. Over here it states that the inanimated world in fact manifests out of the sentient beings' various karmas. So it is very much correlated to the sentient beings, especially their happiness and suffering. There are all kinds of happiness and sufferings subject to different sentient beings. Some have pure suffering, some pure bliss. Some have alternation of suffering and bliss. The various kinds of manifestations and situations in fact is all permeated throughout the three higher realms and three lower realms. And the sentient beings of the six realms have different kinds of experience of such happiness and suffering based on their different karma. Let's look at the celestial beings. Celestial beings, mainly their experience would be happy. Suffering, some of those sufferings are rather very subtle or in a dormant way. It exists in a dormant way. For human beings, we have more suffering than happiness. But our happiness and suffering are the processing happiness and suffering, which means they're very apparent and vivid. When it comes to the lower realm beings, such as the hell realm beings, hungry ghosts, and animals, would have majority of their experiences of suffering. Maybe some of them would be happiness, especially when it comes to the hell realm beings. Their experience is mostly suffering. It is only when, for example, the guards are having a break, then maybe they'll have a moment of this happiness because there's a free, they have the experience that is free from suffering. When it comes to the animals, sometimes they may appear to be enjoying the food. For example, the yaks eating, having grass, or some of the pets eating and drinking, and it seems like they're having fun. But we don't really know what their mental state is. But most of the time, they would have suffering. The suffering is the majority of their experiences. Sometimes our experiences, let it be the processing, the apparent and vivid ones, or the dormant suffering and happiness, in fact, they are the alternation, and they are mixed as well. Sometimes one particular experience may be more apparent, but the other one is more subtle or in dormant state. All the happiness and suffering, the experiences manifesting in certain ways is because of your past karma, let it be of the virtuous or of the non-virtuous, the vice karma. If you completely practice all of your activities out of viciousness, then obviously the karmic fruition would be complete suffering, and vice versa. The human beings mainly enter into this higher realm because of the virtuous roots and the merits. But in our lifetime, we have this alternation of happiness and suffering. And such kind of alternation is not certain. For example, some would spend their first half of life in happiness and second half in suffering, and some in suffering first and then in happiness later. For example, whenever people would talk about when and how their happiness or suffering started, they would remember which year and how it started. Or within a day, we can make the observation, are we happier in the afternoon or in the morning or in the evening? Are we happier or having more suffering during the work or would we have more happiness after work, or within an hour we can make the observation when we would have more suffering and more happiness. These kinds of phenomena, in fact, are very much based on our past virtuous and vice karma. In our human life, in our human group, many people are like such. Some of the animals, in fact, are also like that. At first, maybe some of them are very happy, and then all of a sudden, because of certain things, their life would be turned around completely. For that reason, we should understand that the happiness and suffering within this world are based on our karma. For Tibetans, I think it's easier for Tibetans to understand that everything is created, or our happiness and suffering is very much based on our karma. For example, as a Tibetan, whenever I'm happy, I would think that this is the blessings of the three jewels, and when I'm suffering, I would contemplate that this must have been the vice karma I've accumulated from my past life. However, people who do not understand this point would very much blame on the happiness and suffering onto the others, especially the suffering, or blame everything on the outward or on the phenomenal world, rather than look for one's mind. According to Mipa Rinpoche, he stated that the foolish ones think that the happiness and suffering came from the outer conditions, but not from oneself. Therefore, the foolish one is constantly distracted by the phenomenal world as well as their dualistic thoughts of greed and aggression and so on. But the wise ones knows that all happiness and suffering came from oneself. Therefore, the wise ones would constantly look inward and at his or her own mind so that oneself would not be distracted. I'm not saying that all Tibetans are wise. I'm saying that ever since we were young, we were taught in such a way. We have this faith and we understand that this is because of our karma. And if we do not diligently engage in practice, then we would have to suffer from all the negative karmas that's accumulated from the past. I'm not trying to praise our own ethnic. I'm just simply saying that it has a lot to do with education and the culture. Though lots of the TV programs shows how one should look for other people's fault and blame your own suffering onto the others. It must have been other people telling on me and so on and so forth. You should really think that all of my happiness comes from the positive and all the virtuous things that I've accumulated from the past, and because of the blessings of the three jewels. All of the suffering, in fact, is a result of the negative deeds that have accumulated from the past. People don't think in such a way. Rather, people tend to think that I'm happy because I worked very hard for it, and I am suffering must because other people are responsible for my suffering. This is really not a very good way of working with it. In principle, our happiness and suffering are the results of our own action and our own karma. Of course, there are some of the external conditions which contribute to it as well, but the majority and the main causes are because of our own karma. Without our own karma, there is no way for us to experience the things that we would experience. After we've studied this text, we need to apply the teachings into our daily life and try to think next time and try to contemplate in such a way that everything that I encounter, in fact, is because of me. There is no need to blame it onto the others. You need to find the reasons from yourself. And then Longchenpa further explained, virtue would lead to the virtuous realms and all the kinds of happiness and peace, and vice would lead to all kinds of suffering as well as lower deeds. Such kind of happiness and suffering would alternate in between. Those are simply the manifestations of all kinds of karma. As long as we practice virtuous deeds, we would definitely be reborn in higher realms, human realm or celestial realm. Even Asuras are considered as the higher realms, and the rebirth as Asuras are because of their virtuous deeds. Not only the places that you're born in, also your appearance, your youth, and your provisions that you have, possessions that you have, the wealth and fame, as well as longevity and health. All of such kinds of happiness comes from your past accumulated virtuous deeds. Without even diligently working for them, you would naturally have it. You would spontaneously have it. Nowadays, when we see that there are people who have power, who are very beautiful looking, who have great health, in fact, not because you worked very hard for it in this lifetime or your family brought it for you. Rather, it's because of your past karma that you've accumulated. Similarly, if we were to create vice and unvirtuous deeds, we would experience all kinds of suffering, such as the hungry ghost realm, animal realm, and even the hell realm. After such kinds of suffering finishes from being reborn in the three lower realms, it still takes a long time for you to endure the residue negative deeds by having a low disposition or having an undispleasing outlook or having poor health. Such kinds of external phenomena will be surrounding you. On top of that, you would have lots of fear and doubts and bad mood. All of such kinds of things, including encountering the vicious phenomena and the vicious people and beings around you, such as wolves and dogs that's attacking you, or even vicious people around you, those are the results of the past negative deeds. But as we said previously, all of the variations that we experience are not definite. We would experience those kinds of situations with the alternation of happiness and suffering. For example, if a person who is suffering quite a bit and have lots of illness and different kinds of illness and suffering because of that. But on the other hand, this person may have the merit of wealth or may have the merit of power. So people would venerate him and he would have lots of wealth. Therefore, this person would experience happiness and suffering at the same time. On the other hand, sometimes we see some very happy beggars. They don't have lots of provisions, they don't have wealth, they don't have power, they don't have any of those, but they're very happy. And as long as they would be able to have a little bit of food or a little bit of provision, they would get very happy and they would start singing and even drinking. So we can see that our karma is very complex. When we detailedly investigate into that and contemplate upon it, we can see that in our lifetime there are happiness and there are sufferings intertwined with one another. As practitioners, what should we do? On one hand, we see that we indeed have some karmic debt that led us not practicing well. On the other, compared to the other beings in this world who are non-believers, we are doing quite well. At least we need to give us credit that we have faith to the three jewels and we know how to accept and reject different deeds. I remembered that there was one thief from Tibet who would chant the 21 taras at the same time of stealing. I recently heard of a person who was driving a truck, and in his truck there's the automatic or electronic prayer wheels. At the same time, he was chanting mantra. But he was taking dozens of yaks in his truck to the slaughterhouse. While chanting Mani and the Vajrasattva mantra, he was taking those yaks to a slaughterhouse. So when we look at these kinds of deeds that people do, which is really a mixture of virtuous and vice deeds, that is why we have the alternation or intertwined feelings of happiness and suffering. These kinds of phenomena are so complex. That is why Nagarjuna stated in the Precious Garland of Madhyamika that the non-virtue give rise to all kinds of sufferings and leads to the rebirth in lower realms. But virtue would lead to higher realms and the enjoyment of lifetimes of happiness and peace. There's another sutra named Sangata Sutra, which was translated by Dhanapala into Chinese language. It also stated that if one were to practice all kinds of virtuous deeds, then one would indeed receive the fruition of peace and happiness. If one were to practice all kinds of non-virtuous deeds, then this person would indeed reap the fruition of all kinds of suffering and vex. In the Sutra of Miscellaneous Treasures, stated a story of King Pasenati's princess. The princess was extremely ugly because she has the 18 types of unique, displeasing looks. And the reason behind that was because when she made offering to a Pratika Buddha, she laughed at that Pratika Buddha, saying that, look at your face, your skin looks like fish, and your hair looks like the tail of the horse. Because of her the negative deeds of using such kind of foul language to a Pratika Buddha, she reaped the fruition of being born as a very ugly person. But on the other, because she made offering to that Pratika Buddha, she became the princess. So sometimes when we look at people, there are people who enjoy all kinds of happiness in their lifetime, but in their lifetime, not sure what kind of deeds they would accumulate. So it's hard to say what kind of next lifetime they would create for themselves, because the karma is very uncertain and indefinite. Therefore, it is very difficult to say if we will be able to have the suffering experience or happy experience. Because our life is just like a leaf being blown by the wind of karma. If you want happiness, of course, we all want happiness, but can you really have that happiness? Do you really have control in that? Not necessarily. You don't have a remote control of the karma in your hand. You can't really say what's going to happen later. Therefore, the wise ones, in order not to be controlled by such kind of karma, then the wise ones would pay close attention to karma, to the karmic consequences. That is why the past great masters, at the time of giving the Dharma teachings, would advise the students to be very careful with the intentions and activities. The Buddha said that all the kindness, all the virtue generated from one's intention. So it is very much related to our own mind. But mind is not that easy to control either. For example, when some of you are suffering from illness, if you have illness with heart, with the liver, with the kidney, it's very easy to give rise to anger at the time of being ill, because it's difficult for you to control the four elements. At the same time, our mind is also being controlled by the past karma that you've accumulated. So, from certain aspects, we can understand that when sentient beings, sometimes at the time of creating negative karma, they don't really have control over themselves. Sometimes when people are facing the choices, they don't necessarily want to be a bad person, but the force of karma is so strong that it's just like the landslide. And their own force, their own power of stopping such kind of karma is just like a blade of grass or a tree. There's no way for them to stop the forceful karma. Whenever the karma has already come to the ripening, there's really nothing to fight against it. That is why many people at the time of having the ripened karma presented to them, they can't do anything other than chanting the Vajrasattva vow. The karma is quite profound and very difficult to control and quite unfathomable. We've noticed that in the past, a pair of twins or brothers and siblings, though the parents may have given them the same, provided them the same kinds of education and the same kind of opportunities of livelihood as well as provision, but the happiness and suffering to those children are extremely different. Take a triplet, for example. One could be very happy, and one could have alternation of happiness and suffering, and one could have lots of suffering throughout one's life, and that is very possible. But whatever you're going through, you need to think that this is really because of your own karma. We need to learn to abandon the habitual tendency of blaming it onto the others. We need to know that this is just because of our own karma. Of course, as mundane beings, we tend to do that. We've already accustomed ourselves to blaming our suffering onto the others. But this is really all because of your karma. That is the source of it. If you're happy, you could say that it's because I have a good companion, because I have a good environment, because I have a good teacher. But all of such kinds of conditions of your happiness are sourced from your virtuous deeds that you've accumulated, virtuous karma you've accumulated. Because of your virtuous karma, you met the good teacher, you met a good companion, you received lots of really wonderful resources. It is really because of you. Similarly, if you have lots of negative environments around you, then that is also because of your own karma as well. I don't want to be too extensive. This is really supposed to be the brief explanation. Now, in the extensive explanation, I will be more brief. Over here in the extensive explanation, it talks about the nature of the higher realms and the nature of the desire realm. The higher realm also includes two aspects. One is the nature is with happiness, and then the teaching on it is not parted from suffering either. So those are the two parts. Now, in the verse over here, it talks about the four dhyana heavens as well as the four formless realms. The beings taking rebirth over there is because the beings that had practiced for very long periods of time in the dhyana, in the dana, which is generosity, and then the meditation as well. So, because of all these virtuous deeds, the celestial beings have accumulated a great amount of merit. Therefore, in form realm, formless realm, the beings would enjoy mainly happiness, and their lifespan is about 80,000 or a medium kalpa, or half of a medium kalpa or a medium kalpa, such kind of longevity. Before their lifetime runs to an end, they would enjoy such kind of happiness. So the celestial beings, by relying on the power of dhyana, would abide in the world in such a way. So these are the reasons why they enjoy happiness, and now the reasons of why they do not depart from suffering still. In fact, the celestial beings, unlike the human beings in the human realm, the form and formless realm do not have the great opportunities as us to benefit the others. It is just like how a rich person whom doesn't have any new income, rather just surviving and living with all of his or her savings. In this way, the savings would eventually come to an end. On top of that, with the karma that's accumulated from the previous lifetime, mainly the kind of non-virtuous deeds that's not eradicated yet. For that reason, this celestial beings, after enjoyed all kinds of happiness, would fall into the three lower realms, or it would fall into lower realms. Since the celestial beings have the divine eye and miraculous powers, therefore they would be able to see or to foresee their future life. For that reason, they have lots of fear and anxiety and suffering as well. In different sutras and shastras, such as the letter to a friend, especially the teachings given by Nagarjuna in his commentary, he stated that the majority of beings who are born into the form and formless realm, at the time of death, majority of them would fall back into hell realm. It is because the beings would stay in meditation, and at the time of staying in that meditative absorption, at the time of waking up from it, the celestial beings understand that their life is coming to an end, and they would generate the mind of wrong view, because they thought that the kind of meditation that they are practicing leads to liberation. Rather, at the time of waking up from that dhyana, they realize that they've tread onto the wrong path, and then they would generate the wrong view. And we understand that the wrong view creates horrendous negative deeds. So that would lead them to the three lower realms. That is why we would say that at the time of us, when we generate the wrong view to the three jewels, to the guru, to your own karmic, to your own causes and fruition, the karma, and any kinds of wrong views. At the time of generating wrong views, you should make confession right away. You should say that, oh, I really shouldn't do that because this is a wrong view. This is completely wrong, and to practice the Vajrasattva mantra right away. Now we should look at the desire realm. In desire realm, there are all kinds of suffering and happiness as well. According to the textual outline, it talks about the three lower realms, suffering and happiness, and then the higher realms, suffering and happiness, within which it then talks about the reasons of having all kinds of suffering, and then the next one, the reasons of having all kinds of happiness. In the verse over here, it first talks about the reasons of having all kinds of suffering. The hell realm, hungry ghost realm, and animal realms, because of the non-virtuous karma, therefore they would endure all kinds of sufferings. The sentient beings in the three lower realms, because of the different karma, because of the great negative karma, the medium negative karma, and then the lower negative karmas, because of those different levels of different karmas, the sentient beings would be reborn in the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, and animal realm. The various kinds of sensations and the sufferings they would have to endure is that in hell realm, there are the different extreme hot sensations or cold sensations. In the hungry ghost realm, it is the kind of suffering which is a combination of coldness and hunger, as well as thirst. The animal realms suffers from being enslaved and being beaten and being harmed by the others. The reasons for all kinds of suffering is because of the non-virtuous deeds. It is said that one who creates such causes would reap such fruition. According to Letter to a Friend, as well as other kinds of depictions of the three lower realms, we understand that the beings in Hell realm and Hungry Ghost realm are indeed enduring the unimaginable suffering. And in our human realm, we can witness the sufferings that the animals would have to endure. They are so ignorant and would have to kill each other to feed themselves, and they would have to endure all kinds of harms from the others. In terms of hungry ghosts, according to the sutra, there's a story of one hungry ghost was roaming about in a city and he was starving, so he started yelling that I need food. At that time, when he spoke of food, thousands of other hungry ghosts started to crowd him and started asking him, you said food, where is it? And he said that, I don't know, I'm really hungry, so I speak of food and ask for food. The other hungry ghosts said that it is because we are so hungry and we haven't even heard of food, not even the name of food. And then this particular hungry ghost went to a different city and he was extremely thirsty and he said, water. And that time, thousands of other hungry ghosts surrounded him and said that, where do you see water? And he said, I don't see water either, but I'm really thirsty. Therefore, I said the word water. And the other hungry ghosts said that after being thirsty for so many years, I haven't even heard the term of water. Compared to the hungry ghosts, we as human beings should feel extremely fortunate already. It is just like how the inmates, after being freed from the prisons, they would feel that living this life over here in this world is quite happy and joyous, just as a heaven. In the three lower realms, there are so many different kinds of suffering. So this part talks about the reasons of having all kinds of suffering. And then how about happiness? In the three lower realms, there are various kinds of happiness as well. A little bit of happiness here and there. Over here it says that by the past virtuous deeds, there are the virtuous fruitions. The hungry ghosts would be able to attain food and attain a very brief moment of happiness and peace. Let it be the human beings, non-human beings, human beings, or beings of the different realms, in lower realms, and so on. In fact, they are born in different realms because of the unfathomable karma. The virtuous fruitions such as pleasant outlook, pleasant mood, plenty of provisions, food and clothing, also fame, power, and all kinds of contentment in different aspects of life. Sometimes such kind of happiness could be as small as the experience of while you're climbing a mountain under the blazing sun, you somehow got a bottle of water when you're thirsty, or when it's really cold and raining and you can get an umbrella. These kinds of happiness are very much correlated to the previous virtuous karmas you've accumulated. The beings in the three lower realms, in fact, even if it's as little and as menial as they can get, have close correlations to their past virtuous karma as well. To take a hungry ghost as an example, some practitioners or some monastics at the time of chanting mantras, making smoke offering, or making those offerings of generosity to the hungry ghosts, using various kinds of mantra and using various kinds of methods, skillful means, then tens of thousands of hungry ghosts would be able to gain benefit from it. Even if the sentient beings in the hell realm and in the animal realm, even at the time of being tortured and being harmed, they would be able to attain some kind of happiness, a little bit of happiness, and those all have something to do with the virtuous karma. Then the next verse says that the changes of day and night, in fact, in the lower realms, there are changes of day and night as well. It is said that some sentient beings would suffer gravely in the evening but enjoy lots of happiness during the day. What's the reason? It is because this person used to uphold the vow of no sexual misconduct throughout the day. For such reason, he enjoys happiness throughout the day. But because he doesn't observe such a precept in the evening and at night, therefore, he suffers quite gravely in the evening. And there are sentient beings enjoys happiness in the evening and suffers gravely in the morning, which is completely different than the previous type of person. And that was because this person was a butcher in his past life, and he used to kill sentient beings and slaughter other beings throughout the day. But in the evening, he would sleep and not commit in killing. Therefore, there are different changes of happiness during the day and evening. Also, the beings living in the three lower realms, after encountering some causes and conditions, some auspicious causes and conditions, then their suffering would be alleviated temporarily. For example, whenever we dedicate our merit and chant mantras and rededicate merit to them, then they would enjoy momentary happiness as well. The sentient beings originally living in the suffering that is just like living in hot sand. But at the time of when we rededicated the merit to them, it is just like showering down the rain of nectar, and the sentient beings would then be alleviated from their suffering. Avalokiteshvara, for example, are as well as other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, would also radiate all kinds of light, of blessings to eliminate the suffering and to pacify the sufferings in the three lower realms. Though that the karma has already though the karma of the lower realm sentient beings have already come to fruition, but the blessings and the mantra of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are inconceivable. Therefore, at the time of listening to the Dharma teaching, and whenever we chant mantra, whenever we use all kinds of skillful means to accumulate merit, and if we can rededicate the merit to all of them, then their suffering can be eliminated and can be pacified. At the same time, we should make the aspiration not to accumulate the causes to be reborn in the lower realms, because once you enter into the lower realms, it's very difficult to exit from the lower realms. It's easy to get in, but it's very difficult to get out, just like being imprisoned. It's easy to get sentenced to a prison if you make any mistakes, but it's going to take years and years to get out of incarceration. I just remembered my trip to visit Africa, and I went to give a teaching in the African prison. Over there, it seems that people are just living there without even knowing how many years they need to serve. When I asked them, they said that they have no idea how long they need to stay there. And some said that by making some small mistake, they came into this prison, but after that, there's not much of detailed documentation. It is just like whenever we get into lower realms, it's very difficult to get liberated. Now let's look at the suffering and the happiness of the higher realm beings, which is the human beings and the Asuras, as well as the celestial beings. Over here it says that alternate experiences are formed because of karma. The human beings also have their places, provisions to enjoy the retinues, fame, wealth, longevity, and health, and there are various kinds of enjoyments. So what does it mean? It means that there are happiness in the human world as well, in the human realm. How so? It is because of the previous karma, the force of the previous karma. Some could be real happiness, some could be the alternation of happiness and suffering, some could be the alternation in your mind stream, some could be alternation in different lifespans, some could be the different alternation throughout a day. And when you're happy, for example, in human realm, the place, such as the residence and the enjoyments, your provisions and your cushions and your fame, wealth, as well as retinue and your health as well. So there are all kinds of happiness. In the commentary, it says that, for example, if someone were to buy you a meal, in fact, to buy someone a meal or treat someone a meal is not necessarily because the other person needs you to buy their meal, otherwise they would be starving. It is rather considered as a confirmation or reward or gift, or some ways to have a celebration. It is more of a recognition of the others, and that could be considered as happiness. This is also related to virtuous deeds. So in our human realm, if someone asks you to have a meal together, they'll buy you a meal or praise you to say that, oh, you look really beautiful, and oh, your health, you have such a great health and strength. You look really well, and your ability is good. You're so wise. It is only when you get really good grades in your class, in your exams, then that kind of praise would be quite true. Otherwise, you would probably feel lots of suffering if someone were to say that and you have rather a bad grade. According to Mipa Rinpoche's textual outline, which is quite detailed, in the next part it talks about how the human realm is also filled with suffering. Now let's look at the suffering. There are sufferings in the human realm as well, such as birth, old age, sickness, and death. The parting from the friends and family members, as well as getting together with the ones that you don't like, not getting what you want, as well as being forced by poverty and illness. In our human world, indeed, there are lots of suffering. The sufferings that we talk quite a bit, such as birth, old age, sickness, and death, and getting together with the ones that you really don't like, parting from the ones that you really love, or parting with the family and friends at the same time, maybe without any money, without fame, and other people would start to slander you and no longer praise you, and your body and mind start to wither. So all of those kinds of suffering could happen. Therefore, we need to be prepared for anything. You need to make the preparation that what if I were to leave the city I really love? What if I were to leave the person that I really love? What if I were to have cancer? What if I were to have all the terrible things that happen to me? What should I do? It's very difficult to imagine that right now, but this is really a practice. We need it. When things do happen like that, we need to turn the suffering into the path of liberation. And we have sufficient materials from this human world. Therefore, whenever such kinds of things happen, do not get so frustrated and get so disheartened and feel that the whole world has turned its back on you. In fact, in our human world, all kinds of things could happen, let it be tiredness, drowsiness, or depression, or all kinds of obstacles happening. It could happen. Personally speaking, in the past few years, everything went okay, and then later on, things kept on happening, such as I couldn't leave certain areas, I couldn't go abroad anymore, and sometimes this thing happens, sometimes that thing happens, sometimes I have to deal with various kinds of things. So we need to be prepared for all kinds of situations. And when we have already know the worst situation that could happen and already prepared for it, if it were to happen, then at least we will be very familiar with it. For example, if people were to slander you online, and then think that, oh, what should I do in that situation? Or if you go to a hospital and do an annual body checkup, and then your doctor tells you that you have cancer, and then if you have already contemplated on that, then you won't get so disheartened or so desperate right away. So you have to be very much prepared in your mind before. It may seem to be that everyone is quite happy, but when it comes to facing the life, the karma would come to fruition at its appropriate time. There are all various kinds of situations. What if your parents were to leave this world? What if your relatives were to leave this world? What if your good friends were to leave this world? What if other people were to slander you, were to blackmail you, were to create all kinds of harm to you? What are you going to do? When that happens, you need to contemplate that all of these kinds of situations are no other than the deluded manifestation because of my karma. According to the sutra, it says that the karma can manifest just as a painter. According to the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it's a little bit different, but it says that the manifestation and the activity of all karma is much better than a skilled painter. Karma can paint everything, can manifest anything. For example, if you were to encounter something that is terrible, if your practice is good, then you understand that this is the manifestation of the karma. Though it may seem to be very difficult to accept, but this is something I need to do. Now I will go on a little bit more about the Asuras. The Asuras also have suffering and happiness. Let's look at their sufferings. The Asuras have lots of aggression towards the celestial beings because of their richness. Therefore, their minds are filled with all kinds of agitation and discontent, such that they would harm each other with great aggressiveness. The Asuras, as you know, because of the jealousy and their karma, they're quite jealous of the Trishrimshas heavens, celestial beings, and the beings living in the four heavenly kings' realm. For such reason, out of their aggression and the jealousy, they would engage in battles and war, but they would usually fail. And inside Asuras, the beings, because they have lots of discontentment, all kinds of jealousy and anger and suffering. For such reason, they are not harmonious either. They have lots of quarrels and conflicts too. Now let's look at the happiness of the Asuras. The abundant flower garlands adorns the forest groves. There are nectars, nectar-like meals, and high risers, as well as different chariots. There are different kinds of enjoyments one would not get tired of. The Asuras have such kinds of happiness because of their past positive and virtuous karma. There are all kinds of beautiful gardens, beautiful garlands and tassels and jewels and all kinds of decorations. Their meals and food are just like nectars. Also, the buildings are made of different levels, or the high risers and the elephants, as well as horses and wish-fulfilling trees. There are all kinds of treasures, clothing, and provisions. So such kinds of happiness would last for a very long period of time. But because of their shortcoming, which is not able to get contented with whatever they have, this is definitely their shortcoming. Why would the king of Ashura be reborn in this higher realm, and why is it considered as a higher realm? It is because in the Ashura's realm, they still would have more enjoyment than suffering. But the king of Ashura, because he protected the stupa when others were destroying it, and he also generated the mind of anger and jealousy without generating faith to the three jewels. For such kind of activity, he was born as the king of Asuras. In some sutras, it says that he is rather very displeasing to look at. Some said that he's okay, but this is the personality or character of Asuras. So let's look at one more, which is the celestial beings' happiness. The suffering and happiness has two aspects. The celestial beings over here refers to the 6 desire realm heavens. Previously, we talked about all the celestial beings have their beautiful environment, the wish-fulfilling tree, their chariots, and their nectar-like meals. Therefore, we can see that the celestial beings definitely have more happiness than suffering. They're also very happy inside. They have much better mood than we do. I noticed that there are people who tend to have good mood every day, who have a very positive outlook just naturally. The other day during a meeting, I noticed that over a dozen of the Kempos and Kummels during their meetings, not many people are smiling. Everybody seems like they are suffering quite a bit. There's only a little bit of a chuckling. And some people, because maybe they used to work really hard in their department, but now they switched to a much easier position. Therefore, it seems that they smile much more. Anyhow, the celestial beings have more happiness than suffering. Rather than us, we have more suffering than happiness, but suffering is just the background color of human life, and that is normal. So over here, it talks about the happiness of the celestial beings. Let's look at the sufferings of the celestial beings. At the time of death, the celestial beings definitely would endure a great amount of pain. It is just like after waking up from a blissful dream. At the time of waking up from dream, everything would vanish. So through the divine eye of the celestial beings at the time of death, or around the time of death, they can see that they are about to fall. According to lots of the sutras, it describes the suffering of the celestial beings. Usually, a deva would be surrounded by lots of devis, the goddesses. But at the time of the male devas were about to die, the devis would also abandon him and start to surround the other devas. And then by watching that and then seeing that, they would feel quite a lot of suffering, just like how the human beings are as well. On top of that, the environment that used to be quite beautiful and with lots of bright light made of forests and flowers and groves and gardens, all of a sudden it became almost like a feces-like environment. There are all kinds of maggots, or if the devas were supposed to be reborn as pigs, or to be burnt in hell realm, at that time they would feel grave pain. So having such kind of divine eye is probably not that great either, because they would be able to see what they're going to be turned into in the next lifetime, especially compared to the kind of happiness that they enjoyed previously. Looking at the sufferings that they are going to endure must be gravely painful. On top of that, such kinds of suffering would last for a long period of time. According to resting the mind, the suffering and happiness are expounded more clearly. The happiness and suffering are very much related to good and bad karma. Over here, we didn't really talk about the beings in this world, their happiness and suffering divided by ethnics or countries. It's rather from a much bigger framework from the 6 realms. Let's stop here today.